Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick, Caroline Hyde, Taylor Riggs counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help take us beyond the bell. It's our global simulcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec. We welcome our audiences across Bloomberg Television, radio, and YouTube to parse the most crucial moments of the day. And really, Carol, it's about a look ahead here to the big earnings we get after the bell.
Yeah, well said, Romaine. I'm thinking about Meta, which was already down almost 6% in today's regular trade. So what will we get from that company in particular? Those big tech names, as they have reported this week, look at Microsoft, look at Alphabet today. They really have underperformed in a big way. So we'll see what we get from Meta and whether or not that trend continues.
Well, what have investors priced in? Because we got Alphabet yesterday, and investors were certainly disappointed by what they saw specifically with YouTube's revenue. And also what we got with last week was Snap. Is that a harbinger of things to come for Meta platforms? I
think it is. Most of the analyst reports that we've read this morning have said, watch out, that this was supposed to be sort of the end-all, be-all, right? These are the big tech companies with the great balance sheets and the ability to turn out cash flow. When this finally was a little bit of a moment of weakness that we saw within both companies a little bit, and it is sort of a wake-up call, again, on the bullishness of big tech.
I did think Mandeep Singh made a great point, and to the point that Meta has only 4 sells, 42 buys on it. He's saying, look, in many ways they kitchen sinked it already. They've been highlighting that they've got these headwinds to come, unlike perhaps an Alphabet that hadn't steered the investor base quite as well.
I'm sorry, is kitchen sink on the tip of your tongue because of Elon Musk?
Is. Okay. There's a guy out there who's making a few, statements, theatrically speaking.
All right, about 280 stocks in the S&P 500 are higher here on the day, but you were just talking about it there, Tim and Carol, with Microsoft down 8%, Alphabet down 9%, biggest one-day declines in those stocks that we've seen since March of 2020. Boeing shares also down 9% here on the day as we get the closing bells. You add it all up, you get a Dow Jones Industrial Average that is basically unchanged here on the day. It's up by about 3 points, almost too small of a change here to even quote the percentage. It is in the green, the S&P in the red, down 0.7%, the NASDAQ composite down 2%, and we did see some strength in those cyclical names. The Russell 2000 up 0.4%, Dow Transports up 1%.
Yeah, and Romaine, a VIX easily staying below 30 at this point, dropping another point in today's trade. We've seen it down a couple days in a row here, and the VIX, Taylor, wrapping up just above 27.
Yeah, you see a little bit of the outperformance in the small caps. Come and take a look, Carol, some of the outperformance within a sector level. I think this really highlights the gainers and the losers because there's a lot of green on the screen. It's energy, it's healthcare equipment, it's pharmaceuticals. So you get a sense of defensiveness, but then, of course, with energy and auto components, it does feel sort of risk on. Coming down to the worst performers, there's a little bit of green here in the red, but a majority of it still is red, Carol. And you come and take a look at the underperformers. You don't need me to point this out. It's semiconductors, tech hardware, software and services, and media and entertainment. That's off 5.7%. We know who those big players are.
Yeah, no doubt about it. As we await Meta earnings and a few others, real quickly, those Chinese names, outperformers, Pinduoduo, top in the NASDAQ 100. It was up about 12% in today's session. So just wanted to point out that we did see some bounce back in a big way among those Chinese names that trade in the United States. Universal Health, this is an earnings story, reported adjusted earnings per share for the third quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. It raised the entire sector. Universal Health up about 13%. So really some strong gains.
Yeah, biggest gainer in the S&P.
Right? It's huge. And then another outperformers, Enphase Energy, caught my attention. It was up almost 10% in today's trade, surging the most in about 3 months. The company beat forecast expectations, announced plans to expand in the U.S. following the passage of that, of course, clean energy law that has really helped this sector. But again, some outperformance there, Tim.
All right, well, let's talk underperformance. And Romaine, you mentioned all 3 of these companies. They're so important, they are worth repeating. Starting with Microsoft, it fell 7.7% today, the most since March of 2020. The company yesterday after the close reported its slowest quarterly sales growth, or weakest quarterly sales growth, I should say, in 5 years. It was really that lackluster forecast, though, for Microsoft Azure, its cloud computing division, that has investors really concerned. And then there was, of course, Alphabet, the parent company of Google. Third quarter revenue coming in weaker than expected. It just reinforces concerns about a slowdown in the global ad market. We'll be thinking about this as we digest Meta earnings in just a few minutes. YouTube in particular seeing growth hampered by a pullback in ad spending, falling $400 million short of estimates. And then Boeing down close to 8.8% today. It did report results that actually beat expectations in terms of free cash flow, but they dropped sharply after the company lowered its delivery estimate for the 737. The company said it may discontinue the smallest and largest 737 MAX.
Meanwhile, let's have a quick look at what's happening cross-asset, because today was a day where, once again, it was dollar weakness. It was the fact that you get the pound moving higher. Oh, we're still on your industry groups right now. I'm sure someone's going to tap into GMM, Global Macro Movers, which, of course, is a show that commodities are rallying because dollar is on the weaker side. We've got perhaps a little bit of strength in Canadian dollar, but not much. That's because, of course, the Bank of Canada just shows that, well, maybe you don't have to go at 75 basis points each clip. They did a 50 basis point raise. And, of course, we are, of course, seeing the likes of, in general, a move higher versus US dollar, weaker by 0.9%. I'm looking at oil on the higher side as we see exports perhaps be on fire once again for oil. And I think it's notable that really this dollar weakness speaks to some of the economic data we got today, guys. The fact that we've got a weaker housing data and exports versus imports. Imports looking really strong at the moment. Of course, what does that mean for your GDP that we start to see at the end of the week?
Quickly, no big story here. A second day of yields really falling across the curve. You're coming down about 6, 7, 8, 9 basis points after a significant decline of about 15 basis points lower in yields yesterday on a 10-year yield. So again, as we await another minute, 45 seconds or so, Carol, for these big tech earnings, it's a focus on lower discount rates, but at least today not providing a boost to those high growth stocks.
Can we go through some of the earnings that we have started to get here? Because, I mean, we've gotten some smaller ones out, and, I mean, it kind of paints sort of a broader picture, I think, of what's going on. Align Technology, which of course does the aligners here, that net revenue missing pretty big time here, as well as the EPS, adjusted EPS of 136 versus 217. The numbers themselves, I just bring it up because the numbers themselves are almost inconsequential. It's really about the idea of some of these businesses that were sort of legitimate growth stories not necessarily being that anymore. Meta probably fits into that category.
Or did we just all fix
way.
our teeth during COVID?
Well, not everybody's teeth are fixed. I've been, well, okay, yeah.
You're doing some self-improvement, and it looks lovely, Romaine.
Well, it's going to be interesting, right? I mean, we've really seen how the disappointment on some of these big tech names. We've seen the trade very clear.
All right, let's do it, guys.
Ford, by the way, just crossing. Recording a $2.7 billion non-cash pre-tax impairment on its Argo stake. That Argo stake, let me get it out. So that's a big deal. I know we want to get to Meta because that's just crossing.
Yeah, and we are seeing actually users coming in stronger. Third quarter Facebook daily active users at 1.98 billion. Overall, they are seeing revenue of 27.7 billion. That's slightly ahead of expectations, 27.4 billion. The earnings per share coming in at $1.64, though. That is well below the estimate of $1.89. They're pushing us forward. Fourth quarter revenue will be 30 to 32.5 billion. That's just basically the top end is only just eclipsing overall estimates. And we are seeing ad revenue coming in at 27.25 billion. That's actually a beat. So maybe that's a relief to the market. We're surging up more than 7%. And in fact, that was the size of the headwind as well from the FX basis. But here is a company that's managing to actually bring in the ad revenue that many had anticipated, as we do see also a big spend on Reality Labs, which sees an operating loss of 3.67 billion. This is a company that is still investing for its future with a big loss there, as they still see some concerns around overall advertising revenue coming in basically in line, but that is, of course, is a pullback year on year. The headcount end in 2023 will be about in line with the third quarter of 2022, so they are not going to be adding more people, and they're also making changes to the board to operate more efficiently. And they're increasing their scrutiny on all areas of operating expenses. There is your talk of discipline, I think, guys.
Let me go back to that ad spending, though. I mean, and the stickiness that we've seen there. I mean, what has been the story for really the last several years here? The idea that if you're looking in the digital ad space, there's kind of one place where you have to be, and that's on the various platforms, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, and whatnot.
Some teams are flat in headcount, shrinking other teams within that segment as well. I think Mark Zuckerberg sums it up when he says we focus on near-term challenges on revenue. We're focusing on fundamentals, but we're looking for a return for stronger revenue growth. Really looking in 2023 at a prioritization, efficiency. It's going to help us navigate this current environment. So really highlighting the headwinds and the slowdown.
All right, so we are seeing Meta bounce around. Ford shares by the way, they're down about 1.7% as we speak, also bouncing around in the after hours. Here's some of the big headlines. Talking about the year adjusted EBIT, about $11.5 billion. It had seen 11.5 to 12.5, so it's reining that number in. Also, we mentioned the headline, its investment in the Argo AI autonomous vehicle technology company backed by Ford and VW. Our team reported earlier that they would have an impairment, so they're recording a $2.7 billion non-cash pre-tax impairment, and we are seeing shares of Ford, Caroline, down about 1.5% in the after hours.
Let's return to Meta Platforms, of course, because many had been anxious after the Alphabet numbers. A man who's always steadfast and relaxed about these numbers is Mandeep Singh, senior technology analyst over at Bloomberg Intelligence. And the fact that Mark Zuckerberg is talking about near-term challenges on revenue, but saying that they will return to stronger revenue growth, that sounds pretty optimistic.
It is, and I think if you look at the numbers, the constant currency number, even though it was 2%, it's a beat. And look at the impressions growth, 17%. That's pretty impressive. So that just goes to show that, people are spending time on Facebook properties because that's how, you're driving those impressions. Although it was offset by the ad pricing, which was down 18%. So we saw that yesterday from Alphabet, ad pricing was down 5%. So clearly, there is some Apple IDFA impact baked in. Again, the guidance was so low, and they had already guided to that impact. So clearly, it's a better print than what a lot expected. To me, I think one other thing that stood out was the OPEX guidance. They lowered it further, the 85, even though it's $1 billion lower than their prior guidance. And that just goes to show that they're very serious about the cost cuts. Remember, we were talking about, how Alphabet costs are out of control, and they are now trying to lower it. In the case of Meta, they probably started it a quarter earlier, and that's what it's reflected.
Mandeep, shares down about 7.6% in the after hours right now. They were higher as much as 7% just a few minutes ago after the company reported. Investors continue to pour over these numbers. I want to go to Reality Labs here because this is the pivot for the company. Reality Labs revenue coming in short of expectation, then operating loss for Reality Labs coming in larger than expected. How should investors read into where the company is when it comes to this pivot so far? Because yes, we're talking online ads here, and that's certainly important. But the company said it's going all in when it comes to the metaverse.
Yes, but look, it definitely doesn't contribute to the top line. And we see that, the Reality Labs number, top line number, even though it's small, it missed expectations. And look, no one is buying virtual reality headsets right now if we're talking about a slowing economic environment. So clearly, I think those losses are kind of making the investors nervous in terms of how long they are going to continue. And from a Meta perspective, they really should curtail back on the longer-term initiatives here. Clearly, they have, tried to stabilize the core business, which is what we see in the numbers. But as long as they keep losing money, $3 billion on Reality Labs, that's going to definitely spook investors.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Hey, Mandeep, thank you so much. Of course, Bloomberg's Mandeep Singh. He's senior technology analyst for our Bloomberg Intelligence team. And as we wrap, we've got shares of Meta down about 6% in the after hours, Ford trending lower, down about 2.5% as well. All right, that is a wrap for our cross-platform coverage on radio, TV, and YouTube. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.